Good evening, sports fans.
Good evening.
How you doing, Bob?
If I was doing any better, I'd be bragging. We have everybody but Ashley, so we're still a few minutes early. So I don't want this to be the kiss of death. Sometimes we look at the council agenda and say, this isn't so bad, it should go pretty quickly. And then 8 hours later, we're still there. So I'm hoping there's a different karma over this group.
Anytime past 9 o'clock and you're losing me, baby.
When my daughter was young in Catholic school, principal was a nun, no big surprise, but she had the greatest rule that if a meeting had to go longer than an hour, you have to have another meeting.
I like that. I like that rule.
So while we're waiting, I'm still looking for some volunteers to, one or two of you to be on the parking management study group, preferably, well, no, preferably. I've got two members from zoning. There'll be some citizen representation, some representation from the business community, somebody from the police department, but I would like to have some representation from planning if anyone's interested.
Bob, can you give us some of the concerns about this?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think as a result of the CHOMP application, there was a lot of concerns raised about particularly Water Street area, parking issues. You know, I say often, we don't have a parking problem, we have a parking management problem. You know, every weekend now, I get calls that if I see what was happening on Water Street, I'm never sure that's a good thing or a bad thing, because it's all about parking. So, I mean, you know, I think part of it is, you know, we need to come up with some better signage. We need to direct, you know, restaurant owners and business owners for their staff to not take parking spaces close to where they work. You know, if we can improve that, then we might be looking at resident sticker parking, which, you know, will put the fear of God into people. But I think, you know, we also have to change people's perception that, you know, people could park at town hall, even at the park and ride. You know, it's less than a half a mile as the crow flies from the park and ride to Square Peg, as an example. And in any other situation, if you head to a restaurant or anybody in the retail business, you could park for free that close. They would be all over it. I mean, people pay to park in Providence. So, I mean, it's just a perception issue that we have to change with people. But, you know, and the other thing I want to look at is, you know, churches have parking lots that are vacant 90% of the time. You know, we don't charge them property taxes? You know, can we start to look at, you know, I don't care if they charge.
I'm happy to help.
Okay, so we got Tyler and Brett. Your membership cards will be forthcoming in the mail.
Great.
I have 7 o'clock, Mr. Massey, and you have a full roster of members. We're live on YouTube. It's recording. So if you want to call the meeting to order.
This is the Warren Planning Board's regularly scheduled meeting, Monday, May 24th, 7 p.m. The meeting is on Zoom and it is being recorded as well as broadcast, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. And you do have a quorum.
And relative to the Waterfront Overlay District Development Plan Review, according to zoning ordinance Article 26, there is nothing in front of the board tonight. There are no public hearings. So the first order of business is approval of the minutes for 4 previous meetings. These were circulated prior to the meeting. I know that Andrea had some concerns, I believe, about the last minutes. Does anyone have any concerns or corrections to any of those 4 minutes that were sent out?
No.
Not hearing, not hearing anything.
Hold on, Fred. I
wanted to address your concerns, Andrea.
Okay. Yep.
The points that you made, I was looking at them and I'm hoping that, I think the most important thing is for those to be in the decisions that were presented that go on record. But as you had noted, I think it would be helpful for that information to also be in the meeting minutes. Bob, your
Yep.
thoughts on that?
No, I don't, I was going to give Andrea a chance to speak to him. I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, I agree with you that, vegetative buffer on both cases. I mean, that's a condition for final approval. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, not with respect to those specific applications, but just in general. But no, I think, I think one thing moving forward, we want to be very careful with anything with respect to minutes and decisions that were very specific in terms of what the wishes and goals and conditions that both this board as well as the zoning board put on applications. So I'm okay.
I'd also like to know when we were going through that, we noted that the language that we had previously discussed about the landscaping, for example, on the Metacom apartments, was going to go into the formal language of the approval. That is separate from the meeting minutes, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, and that was all that's been approved for that project is master plan approval. I mean, they still need to come back after they go to zoning for preliminary and final, and whatever the requirements, the landscaping plus anything else that comes up will be part of that approval decision.
Okay, so since that isn't there, I think it's most important that that information appears, as well as referencing the ordinance that Ben had given us.
Yep.
Concerning our ability to enforce that, because this was the issue with the Chase Farm problem that we had, that while I think it was mentioned in meeting minutes, it was not in the decision, but clearly having it in both places would give us greater power.
Yep, I agree.
Andrea?
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I thought it would be helpful when we're talking about the CHOP decision is that, and it was certainly because it was really influential to me, is that they met the parking requirement. They met the minimum parking requirement. And I think that's what people are going to care about. And that's what people will ask questions about going forward. In fact, I got stopped on the street by somebody the other day asking me, why did you guys approve that?
I mean, I just want to reiterate with respect to the parking. There is an agreement that was set forth in the conveyance from the Trust for Public Land to 3 separate property owners, the town included, the owner of the property that CHOP is looking to purchase, and the owner of where Trafford's restaurant is, which set forth the agreement with respect to parking, that each 3 entities got 18 reserved parking spaces, and then there was an additional public parking space. So certainly we don't have the opportunity to amend a 3-party agreement where the other 2 are never going to agree with us. As was discussed in zoning, depending on what the fire chief says with respect to additional parking that they may or may not be able to create there. And based on our ordinance and the fact that they are looking to do takeout, they might have to reduce the number of seats that they have because they can't meet the parking requirement. And that's part of the decision from the zoning board. So And which is why we're, I mean, kind of forming this parking study group, because, I mean, I think there's a lot of bad information out with respect to the town wharf. I mean, the town had no way to influence the parking as it related to Chomp, unfortunately. But, moving forward with new projects, we have a chance to put our finger on the scale a little bit more than maybe we have in the past.
I
We'll
can,
talk about that in a
my
bit.
only suggestion is that we put it in the minutes, that was information that was given. to the-
Yep, you can do that. Yep, I'll get that language to Rhonda and she can include that.
Based on, I agreed with, and as did Bob, with all of Andrea's recommendations. So do we approve each month's minutes separately?
You should,
Okay.
with amendments as discussed.
Right, now I think, but the amendments, Andrea, that you came up with were specific to our last meeting, correct?
No, they're actually to the 22nd, to the one on April, and there were three.
Okay, yeah, right, I'm sorry, I was looking at, so can you, as we're moving for the approval on 3/22/21, your request for an amendment on that?
Okay,
Was-
it was just to add it mentions, we talked a lot about parking. I just like to add is that we were informed by Mr. Rui that the parking spaces provided by the applicant met the minimum regulatory standard and was in accordance with previous agreements.
Okay, based on that amendment to those minutes, I'd ask for a vote to approve. I need a-
Gerhart has his hand up. Take yourself off mute, Mr. Gerhart.
Unmute.
Mike, you're on mute. And still on mute.
All right, so I'm gonna
Got
ask for,
Mr. Gerhart, go ahead.
So I don't,
Is
Sue
where?
I don't think that's exactly
No,
true. They didn't meet the regulatory requirements. They essentially utilized some of the public parking to meet the requirements.
That's in the agreement. I mean, the agreement is very specific that those public parking spaces are open to whomever. They meet the requirement for it's 4 seats per parking spot. They have 18. So 4 times 18 is the maximum amount of seating that they can have. They can't use those public spots to meet their seating requirement.
So that 18 is the limit that defines the.
18 is what they have. They have deeded rights to 18
I get that.
times 4. That's the amount of seats that they can have legally.
But as I understood it, their argument was that they had access to the public
They
space.
can,
as well.
anybody can park there, but that doesn't give them an increase in seating. I mean, Trafford's uses those spaces, have used those spaces historically, but again, that does not, they can't use those to count towards what their capacity is.
Thank you.
all right, again, based on the amendment, which is essentially just stating what actually happened at our meeting, I'd ask for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from 3/22. I'll make the motion. Could I have a second?
Mr. Patterson has his hand up. Everyone just want to
All in
say,
favor, just raise your hands.
Aye.
looks like the majority has it. Yep, and we're unanimous.
419, Andrea?
These, I'm sorry, I'm like blanking out. What did I didn't write it down that way. Hold on, let me just take a quick look. I apologize. I'll have to do it this way. That was actually just really a question. I don't think, there was just one comment in there about the the amount that was going to be contributed
Yeah.
for the affordable housing. This is
It
not that
hasn't been
important.
There's no finalization on what that formula is going to be yet.
Okay, so we
That would be
can let
part
that
of the
go.
design guidelines for the form-based code.
Motion to approve 419, second. Jim Patterson, all in favor? Passes. Okay, 426, meeting minutes. Anything there, Andrea?
No, that was the non-meeting.
Motion to approve. Second, Jim Patterson, all in favor?
We're on a roll.
And 5-3.
This was just the, including the landscaping, the buffer commitments.
So for Maine Nobert, that will be part of the final decision. And then again, on Medicom, it's just at the master plan approval. So once the preliminary and final approval, that will be part of the decision.
And also noting, based on the ordinance, which
Yes.
gives the town the power to enforce that moving forward, no time restraint.
Yep.
Okay, motion to approve as amended. Jim, all in favor? All right. Old business, it's revisions to Article 4, Section 7-132, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Bob, take
Yep.
it away.
Sure. So, and I want to thank Brett because he helped me refine some of the language. We've taken out references to workforce housing and are going with affordable housing because most of the HUD programs and state programs all refer to affordable housing. This matter had its first reading at the May Town Council meeting. It will have its second and final reading at the June meeting. The only significant changes is that in one section, we had said that any funds would be put out as a loan. We've added in grants because if somebody donates money to the fund and they want that money to be in the form of a grant, then we want to make sure we're able to honor that. So other than that, the document is intact. But again, I thank Brett for helping clear up why we're not in front of the Supreme Court.
Happy to help out.
So that's really just, I mean, there's no action that needs to be taken, Mr. Massey, just an update to the board as to where we are with that.
Well, thank you, Brett, for your extracurricular work.
No problem.
I think
And
Mike
Bob-
has his hand up.
And Bob for moving this forward.
Mr. Gerhart,
Bob, could you just summarize briefly what the sources of income are here? Is the tax incentive financing one of the inputs?
I mean, some of it's, I mean, there's no identified sources at the moment. They could be a grant from Rhode Island Foundation. It could be, a grant from Rhode Island Housing. I mean, one thing that we have added into that is as part of the form-based code, we are allowing initially developers on Medicom additional density if they included workforce or affordable housing, which is a bonus. Should they choose not to want to do that, and they want the extra density, and again, we're going to come up with a formula to ask them to contribute to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And this is something we did very successfully down in Virginia when I was there. So whatever their choice is, one way or the other, we're going to get some reward for allowing extra density. And so I think it's fair. There are provisions within the state to, a town can say in lieu of giving us affordable payments, give us a cash contribution. But, I think it needs to be, if somebody's going to get extra density and do market rate apartments, then, that's a substantial payment that the town should get towards the trust fund.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so more on this later. Under new business, the administrative officer report, there was a public webinar, May 12th, 7 p.m. on YouTube. Bob,
Yeah, I mean, it's, we have a website up for the Metacom project now. That link is there. The link to the YouTube webinar. It was lightly attended. Thank you to those members of the planning board that did attend. It's a struggle that we have as to how to have more public engagement into these issues because they're pretty significant. I mean, if you have a chance to look at the YouTube video, I think it's not a lot of me, it's a lot of other people. And I mean, there's some really compelling information in there in terms of the economic loss. What we had the Chief Resiliency Officer for Fuss and O'Neill talking about, what the implications of sea level rise are in the very short term. So we will be doing another public outreach, I think, in the end of July. We'll be doing some more mass mailings and publicity to get the information out, but it's a pretty significant issue that, I think that I don't know why people aren't paying attention. I mean,
Well,
but-
part of it clearly is, the pandemic. Nobody's, ordinarily these would be public meetings. So, where people would attend in person. Also, the immediacy of the issue. Frankly and unfortunately, it doesn't often rise to the public interest until some action is actually going to be taken.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's, one of the things that we've tried to focus on is that, historically NOAA and FEMA, look at 50 and 100-year projections. And, one of the things that we're trying to focus on is here's a 10 and 25-year projection, I mean, which is much more real. And the amount of repetitive loss that we're going to see in this area is certainly going to impact people's ability to get financing and to get insurance. So, we're not trying to scare people, but, the problem is not as far off as people think it is. But you're right. I mean, some people will not believe this is a problem until NOAA comes by in the Ark with 2 of 2. And then they begin to think that, holy smokes, we need to do something. But I think it's important that the town is continuing to be proactive and not reactive, because reactive is too late. And we've tied this into what we're trying to do on Metacom, which is unique, that we're trying to deal with several issues at the same time and in a positive way. But again, I think the quality of the webinar was wonderful. The other 2 panelists were wonderful. And we'll continue to go at it. But Mr. Patterson?
Bob, some of the material that you shared on that webinar I thought was compelling, especially the maps that showed the short-term effect, or the effect short-term of the sea level rise and how it impacted the evacuation routes and also the commercial areas. If there was some way, and I'm not quite sure what the most effective way would be, to put those maps on some sort of a link and make the link available on the town's website, people could access those maps. When I saw them, that was that was a major wake-up call for me. I mean, if we have one of those events, nobody's going to be able to leave town except by helicopter.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jim. I mean, we can do that. So that's all I had on that. I will be checking to see how many of you watched the YouTube video subsequent to this meeting. And if you don't, I will track you down.
Yeah. Moving right along.
Next is, so you remember what's that? Next is, do you remember, so in the Settlers Green discussion, Mr. Landry kept referring to an affordable housing plan that the state had approved, but the town council had never approved, which is true. But we do actually have an adopted affordable housing plan, which I sent you, which was from 2000. And what I want to do as part of our efforts to look at workforce housing and Metacom is to review that, because as I said in my email, we've made exactly zero progress in the last 21 years to meeting any of those goals, which is consistent with what, this is an opinion, not the opinion of the town of Warren, just Bob's opinion, that, you know, the state's programs are equally as ineffective, because only 6 communities in the state meet the requirements, you know, that for the affordable housing goals. So, you know, at some point we need to smarten up and say, this is not working, hasn't worked in 21 years. The state program hasn't worked. And I think, you know, what we're doing in terms of how we're approaching Metacom and upzoning and creating density and creating the Affordable Housing Trust Fund are all ways to get to that goal that are achievable. But these pie in the sky, let's have a group hug and let's just hope that everything works out, you know, plans don't work. So I wanted to share that with you, and, you know, over the next couple of months, I will start to re-edit that, segue that into, we are going to bring in Fuss and O'Neill to assist me with updating the comp plan. So that affordable housing plan will be reworked and be made part of the comp plan. I've got a meeting with people from statewide planning and Fuss and O'Neill the first week of June. Again, I mean, my goal is to have our comp plan be more of a corridor study than the template comp plans that everybody's been using that don't work. But so, I mean, I just wanted you all to have that, look through it. But again, I think the most telling piece was that we might have picked up 2 or 3 units in the last 21 years since that was adopted, which is not, I mean, that's just a bad system.
Well, we're also coming into uncharted territory with the price of real estate nowadays skyrocketing.
Yeah.
So what constituted affordable housing is completely unrealistic in today's market. And, you know, we saw some of this with the Norbert Street development. The idea that 300,000 plus condo would be considered affordable housing really puts a question on the definition of affordable.
Yeah.
So,
and again, I mean, I think that's one of the things the state needs to look at is that, you know, if you're looking at your income is based on median average income, and that median average includes Barrington and Bristol, well, your number is always going to be skewed. I mean, and that's, you know, I think it should be looked at municipality by municipality. I mean, $300,000 far exceeds any surrounding property to that project. And so, I mean, I don't fault the developers. I mean, I fault Rhode Island Housing in the state for kind of promoting the policies that they have, saying that it's affordable when it's not. But I mean,
also,
I mean,
Bob,
I agree with that.
right. I mean, the discussion, the comprehensive plan is important, as we've seen. It's, you know, good to know that you're going to be getting some help on that because it's a complex process, as we know. But it does serve as the basis for the planning board decisions. And
yeah, I mean, and it's, you know, I think what's become clear more than the planning board is that, you know, I'll go out on a limb. I mean, I think, you know, the zoning board recently has made some decisions that I don't agree with, based on what they say is in the comprehensive plan. So, I mean, that is kind of what leads into the next item for discussion is how we review things. In conversations with the solicitor, not Ben, Tony, and Kate and Carrie, you know, going forward, any kind of controversial application that the planning board is being asked to give an advisory opinion or a site plan review on, we will conduct a technical review committee of that application. We will issue a statement of findings of fact that we'll give to the zoning board. So if they are of the mind that they want to disregard what the planning board said, they can have a run at that. But and, you know, again, you know, one thing that we've worked into the form-based code for Metacom is that the design guidelines, they don't get to zoning. They get approved at the planning board level. And I think one thing we're going to look at is adopting design guidelines and probably for the waterfront district and the downtown district, so that, in fact, those decisions will be made by the planning board and take them away from zoning. So, I mean, I've got some frustration with, again, some recent decisions that zoning has made that I think have negative implications for the town going forward.
And in relation to the planning board as well, I think that all of our decisions in the future, when they are based on existing ordinances, if there is dissent, then that dissent has to be couched in reasoning for the dissent. It's not enough to just say, I don't agree, or because that we're making decisions based on existing law. And in that case, I'm talking about ordinances, but a read of it. And obviously some of it is subjective to some degree. And to me, it's important, if there is dissent, to understand what the basis of that dissent is, because quite frankly, that dissent could lead to a change in the ruling by the planning board. But without that justification, without a clear, well presented series of arguments as to why those are, simple dissent doesn't help us and does not move the process forward.
Right. I mean, I think things will get better now that, like Tabitha wiggling her nose, apparently the pandemic's over, so everything's back to normal. I would expect in June, we're going to be in-person meetings for the majority of meetings. I mean, we still have to provide for remote access, but this board and the zoning board will be meeting in person beginning in June. We've got our technical difficulties worked out. But yeah, I mean, it's, we've got, and not this board, but got people participating in meetings by phone, voting on applications where people are showing plans and drawings, and you're voting on something you don't even see. I mean, I fundamentally have a problem with that. And
Bob, this review process, when does this take place?
as soon as, I mean, if there's something that's going to zoning that requires site plan review by the planning board, then, we will schedule a TRC before the actual planning board hears that, just so we get out in front of some of these things. And, again, we might look at some of these applications to say that, it's a land development, it's, as an example, and this is real time, and this is a frustration I have, is that the medical office building that is next to the CVS on Medicom, AutoZone is negotiating to put an AutoZone store in there, which, is offensive to me because there's a higher and better use but that's how people see Medicom right now. So I, in conversations with their consultants and their engineers over the end of last week, I said, well, there's nothing I can do to stop that because we don't have the zoning amendments in place. We don't have form-based code in place, but I can assure you that the conditions for approval will be, if the planning board says that AutoZone should look like a church, it's going to look like a church. I mean, so you can put those design guidelines on, you can put conditions on what the appearance of that store is. Zoning can weigh in on what the signage is. So, I mean, we don't just have to allow it to be a cookie cutter. This is the store we always build. Now they can appeal that if they want. That wouldn't be in their best interest, but I think that the planning board can play a stronger role in saying, this is what we want it to look like. We don't want it to look like an AutoZone.
And so in essence, we're able to move forward in part on some of this, but as you and/or the town council see a presentation or a request, that would now go to a TRC.
Yep.
From this point forward.
Yes.
Okay. Any comments from the board, concerns, questions?
You're on mute, Tyler.
Regarding design review of a building from a planning board standpoint, what authority, statutory or otherwise, do we have to dictate what they can build, as long as what they build is within our zoning codes?
No different than what you did on Norbert. I mean, you can weigh in on windows, you can weigh in on what kind of materials they use. I mean, that's a planning, it's no different than asking for, you want a vegetative barrier. I mean, those are site plan conditions.
No, I understand that we kind of like the vegetative thing, where in that scenario, there was no legal obligation for them to put a vegetative barrier because the zoning doesn't require that. And we want them to do that. And we wanted them to voluntarily commit to doing that. And I think it was great that they did. I'm all on board with encouraging people to have architecture that is appealing and fits with the direction that we're going. But I would love to hear maybe Ben's opinion on how we can start almost denying what rights they have in the laws because we're adding something that isn't in the law.
Well, just to clarify before you go, Ben, on Medicom, that wasn't, they were asking us for something, so that was a trade-off. That vegetative buffer was not just nice to have. That's.
Oh, you mean on the golf course thing?
No, on Medicom Avenue, the
apartments.
The apartments.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking of
that clear. That wasn't they weren't just doing it to make us feel good.
Right. No, that one, I totally agree with you. In my mind, I was thinking of the mini golf when we talked about the vegetative thing up front.
That's on Market, the one on Market
Yeah,
Street.
that was, right. So yeah, you're right. My bad.
Okay, go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
I think this all goes back to what Fred started with. The comp plan is the foundation of everything. In fact, when you have to make findings of fact for any development, if it's a minor development, if it's a major development, if it's site plan review, one of the standards is got to meet and be consistent with a comprehensive plan. So if it's within that comprehensive plan, then you got the legal back and to deny something saying it's not in conformance with it. In addition to that, it's looking at the current overlay districts. We have, the Kikumuit, waterfront, the rural. Each of those list its own standards. Certainly can revisit all those standards and make it updated. And that's another way to get, kind of direct these projects in the way that the board wants to see them be developed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, Ben ruined my Sunday yesterday by sending me an email saying that they're finishing the Settlers Green decision. And, could I point to what sections of the comprehensive plan, supported our position? Well, that's easy because when you read the comprehensive plan from 2003, it speaks in so many areas about preserving the rural character of Warren, preserving open space and farmland. And it's outdated, but so we will temporarily use that to our advantage. But, we need to get more real. But as it exists now, I mean, it does say those things 21 years later. And it is what is the in place comprehensive plan. So, I think going forward, we'll get smarter about it, but we will, as part of the comprehensive plan, talk about design guidelines and design standards and what we want certain areas of town to look at and why we're doing it. And that's why, I think a corridor study is more appropriate than the comprehensive plan, because as I said before, when we look at Medicom as a development area, it checks all the boxes for the elements required in the comprehensive plan. You want to preserve open space? Yeah, you do it here because you don't have the infrastructure in Tuisset or the northeast section of town. You want to improve transportation? Yes, you do it here. You have housing, you do it here. I mean, all of those boxes get checked by doing development where you can do development. You want to preserve historic buildings? Yes, you do it. New development on Medicom and preserve what's in the historic downtown in the waterfront areas. So, I mean, easy for me to say, and it's going to be really hard to get some guy that works in a cubicle in Providence to understand that this is reality. But, again, these comprehensive plans are 400-page documents that no one ever looks at. I mean, the fact that we are still operating off the 2003 plan, and and nothing has happened, is as difficult as having an affordable housing plan that was adopted in 2000. So, we're at a crossroads, and, the timing is good. We're updating our hazard mitigation plan. That will be dropped into the comprehensive plan. So, and there were some good things actually in the update that Shamu's group in Caroline, had done 2014, 2015, for whatever reason, she didn't want to move forward with it. But, so we're not as bad off as we thought we were. And my goal is, still, we're going to get this done this year. I succumbed to the reality that I needed some help. And Kate has authorized, Fuss to come in and give us, and Arnold Robinson and I will work on it together. And Arnold has a lot of experience doing these things. So, I think we'll have a really good plan in a short period of time.
Excellent.
Right.
I'm glad to hear Arnold's working on it as well. That's, he's a good mind to have on that. And again, there was work, and I think I'm the only member on the board today who was there in 2014, 2015, but there was good work done then. Some very thoughtful stuff, particularly about rural areas. What you've brought, Bob, to the table is solutions. What we had in that 2014, 2015 plan were issues of preservation. There was a good deal of focus on that, but not necessarily a solution to how you would preserve that land. So those two things, I think, can fit very well together.
Yeah. Andrea?
Just is a part of what you're going to be doing, Bob, updating this low and moderate income housing plan that you gave us? Is that going to be a part of your?
Yep.
Okay.
I might add that Andrea has done work as well, identifying areas around town other than the Metacom area where there is where there are opportunities for affordable housing locations. And I'd like to thank her for the work that she did on that, which would also be wrapped into this comprehensive plan.
Absolutely.
That was really important, and an area that actually had not ever been addressed. In the previous comprehensive plan, there was kind of vague motions out toward and this is not the 2014, 2015, this goes back to the 2001, where people were talking about, well, if you need affordable housing, we got plenty of open space out there in, the north end of town or in Chewisset, why don't we put it there? And actually, it's one of the problems with that. Fortunately, that wasn't too strong, but that was something that Caroline had worked on, which is why Landry was talking about that for Settlers Green, that those areas were looked at as areas of opportunity rather than areas of protection.
Yeah, we had multiple police reports of Andrea stalking people's vacant lots to identify those as potentially being available for housing. And again, it opened my eyes to a lot of, just drive by, don't think about it, but why couldn't it be? It's near downtown, it's near a bus route, and just because it's not readily visible, it's actually a very desirable opportunity. And to that point, where Warren House of Pizza is, that property was recently sold in the last 10 days to the owner of the property immediately to the south, the Tavares building, with plans to improve that property, which it needs, and to expand that property. And I spoke to the attorney for the owner. I said, this is because if you're familiar with that property, it has an abundance of parking in the rear that goes down to Railroad Avenue, and the elevation goes off pretty significantly. So, you could extend the building line out and park again underneath. So I suggested to the attorney for the new owner that they consider a comprehensive permit application for the redevelopment of that based on what we saw at Maine Nobert. And, she indicated to me that he wasn't necessarily looking for these to be for sale. They would be for rent. And that he had some concerns when you do rental, you have to have a monitoring agency in. And that's a little bit of a headache, but if you do it right, it's not. But I also, suggested to her that if she wanted to go through the perils of Historic District Commission and zoning, you should do that. Or here's an alternative. You can do it as a comprehensive permit. And, again, what we saw, what the rents could be at Settlers Green, what they had suggested the rents would be if they weren't for sale at Main Obert, those are still far above what market rents are that we're seeing now, with the exception of the 2 tourister buildings. So, I'm hopeful that, we might get another chance to do a really good infill project that will serve the purposes of many different things and improve downtown.
Great. Anything further, Bob, or members of the board?
I will just say for Ashley's purposes, we've identified that we have fiber optic connectivity in town hall buildings and the police station. And we are in the process of finalizing our agreement to bring high-speed internet to the town of Warren. And taking that one step further, I'm negotiating with Cox to allow us to access all their hotspots throughout Warren so that people will have access to free high-speed internet. So we are cutting edge.
Great.
Great. Well, we have accomplished this in what looks to be under an hour. So we can either talk meaninglessly for another 45 minutes, or we can head off to Netflix land.
Well, if anyone is interested, I could talk about my experiences in band camp when I was young.
You know what? I'm going to go for a motion to adjourn.
What summer in band camp?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Play
Thank you,
your
everyone.
elbows.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll do this. I'll put it on the